there is no correlation between delighting a customer and retaining them.
Most of the time when we talk about product development, we want to test it quickly, to get things in front of real users and see what happens, learn from it, and iterate. But what happens when your tax prep software is used just once a year? Or how can you maximize your audience when they only use the product for life-changing events?
Most of them didn't start out to change the world. The change the world happened as a matter of them being successful, not the other way around.
How do I understand what's going through my user's mind?
You buy a Nike shoe, you wear it every day, the brand gets reinforced on you every day.
Hey, it's the Product Experience, and I'm Randy Silver. I sat down with Vivek Kumar to talk about managing low-frequency products and the ICED framework. It's something he's an expert in. Based in Singapore, Vivek led product at Property Guru, has contributed to Reforge on this topic, and he's got a cohort-based course on it this fall.
All the low-frequency products have a clear problem definition.
Vivek, thank you so much for joining us today and making time in your week. How's it going?
All great. Thank you for having me, Andy.
So you are well known in your area, but not everyone knows you. So can you do a quick introduction, please? What do you do now, and how did you get into the world of product in the first place?
Look, 20 years into product management, my career spans across 3 sets of companies. The first part of my career was a lot into startups, a lot of first time online gaming, first time ad tech in India, a bunch of first things ever to be done. And then I built my own company, which was primarily solving, uni's way of managing alumni, built and sold it. And I decided that, okay, now maybe time for me to build some muscles up in terms of how do you manage scale. So then came Amazon, PayPal, Intuit. So that was a good journey in terms of seeing scale, what happens in bigger orgs. And post that, the third part of my career was into scale-ups. So the 7 years was spent part of the exec team with Property Guru. We listed in NYSE, and currently now heading products with a company called Circles. It's been fantastic, right? Circles, for those of who don't know about this, it's a telco pivoted into a B2B software company. So we help telcos across the world become much more digital, and we call this TechCo. And we sell them a full stack of software to enable this journey. So and I had products there. So that's kind of my 20 years overall. To your question on how did I land in product, I started my career with a services company, and we were consulting the big guys. But something within me said that, the revenue per employee is really not adding up. For the time spent, I might as well make more money. And this is way back in early 2000s. And if you look at the revenue per employee of the product companies, they're enviable. And that bet turned out to be right. I moved into the product company. And from there on, things have been pretty good, both in terms of the interest of the work and overall from a life perspective.
Fantastic. Okay, so we invited you on today because of a series of articles and a course that you do on Reforge about infrequent products. And this is something that's come up a number of times in conversations that we've had in the past. But let's start at the very beginning about the definition. So, I've got, I don't know, 1,000 apps on my phone, probably not that many, hopefully, but that I don't use very often. I have other things. What are those infrequent products? Is it defined by my interaction, by the design of the interaction, of how often I should be using it? What makes it an infrequent product?
Great question. The infrequency definition aligns with the natural usage of the product. For example, buying a property or renting a property is not something that you do on an everyday basis. It happens episodically at any point in time in life. And so that's a great definition of infrequency. Now, there is no set law, if you will, in terms of what really marks that period of infrequency. But for my own definition, I've always used anything less than 3 months in terms of the usage, that would classify itself as infrequency. And why is this? Because anything within that range, you could possibly recall your experience. So for example, if I bought a book on Amazon 2 months back and I'm going back buy another book, let's say another 2 months, I still recall Amazon. I still recall the place that I'm buying it from. But this is starkly different from, let's say, a travel portal. You've traveled 6 months back, and again, you want to travel back. Sometimes you may not recall where you wanted to transact or where you want to transact. So the recollection goes down as the time elapses, and hence the term infrequency or low frequency. So the episodic products, and 3 months is a good yardstick to keep in mind. Anything less than that, has a challenge with recall. This is one definition. The other part that you would see with infrequent products are that most infrequent products, and we'll touch upon this later in the chat, do not have a constant usage with the business. And hence, you have a small window of time where you need to monetize the customers. Example, a dating app. So someone goes onto the dating app, they're going from, let's say, month 1 to month 3, and apparently, hopefully, they find a partner within that. But within that sliver of time, you need to recover your marketing costs and profit from the user out there. So that gives you a small window of time. And both of these, which I just said, which is like the episodic interaction and the small sliver, also sometimes ensures that there's a lot of pressure on your marketing as well. So the LTV CAC of these companies are pretty much usually stressed. So, but the primary definition is there should be a strong recall, and you have a small window within which you need to monetize the users. That's kind of a good way to think about your low frequency products.
That's fantastic. That's very informative. So the problem for a lot of people is most of the literature out there, most of the examples that we see are for things that are B2C. We talk about product market fit most of the time in terms of daily, weekly, or monthly active users. For enterprise, it might be sales frequency and sales pipeline. For an infrequent product, how do we define PMF?
When I was managing TurboTax, this was one of the questions that we wrestled with, because around that time is when this whole notion of product market fit actually came into the market. And the product market fit classic definition, and is basically you have a high retention with people, and especially on the consumer side, the more your cohort retains, and now everybody's, I don't know if you've seen this graph of ChatGPT, having the smile curve, and people are now saying that that's a great example of product market fit. It's a high retentive product, high frequency, high usage. But then if you just transpose that definition into these products that I'm talking about, let's say property, dating, job, people retain for a certain period of time, but the very nature of the product, they need to get out after the transaction. Let's say dating, once you find your partner, you no longer can be on the platform.
Well, ideally.
Ideally. And if the product has done its job well, then you need to let them go at the soonest. Then the question is, how does the traditional definition of product market fit actually apply here? And the reason why we also have this is because product management at its core were built by the playbooks from Facebook, Zynga, and the other likes, right? So to now transpose this and find a definition for product market fit, I kind of simplified things. So let's say, without any jargons, if you just want to break this down and understand, in a city or in a locality, let's say there's mobile brand A, mobile brand B, two of them are there. And 50 people buy mobile phones in a month. Now, mobile A sells 35 units, mobile B sells 15 units. And the question is, which has got better product market fit? Mobile brand A, it goes without saying. So if you just break it down into these simple examples, and which has been around us for a long time, the product market fit by its classic definition should be about which brand has or which product has the maximum market share. So the penetration in here is a function of the market share as against the retention out here. there's also another reason why penetration is important. If you look at something like a jobs in a market, at any point in time, only a certain set of people are looking for jobs. Let's say, 1,000 people in a city, 300 might be looking for a job. And let's say there are 3 products out there. The product that has the maximum job seekers win. So always, if you were to look at it, it's the market penetration which counts for an infrequent product as against the retention of high frequency product.
That makes sense. Okay, another problem that we have with infrequent products is, another thing that we're always taught to do is to iterate quickly and try new things and learn from our experiments. But when people aren't using your product that often, taxes, education with testing and things like that, you only have certain times a year, and it's very high risk to put out new iterations of something if people only use your product once or twice a year. And it takes a very long time to take the learnings from actual use cases and put them back in. So we're told to fall in love with the problem and help people solve it. And we have got all these things, and we're looking at the TAM and the SAM and prioritizing. But if we can only do this very, very frequently, what's a good approach to prioritization and learning when we're working with an iteration, when we're working with these long cycles?
So when you're referring to prioritization, you're referring to how we learn about the customer problems?
Which problems do we solve, and how do we solve them? We've got 1,000 ideas on our backlog and potential solutions, but we can't do all of them, and we can't do all of them at the same time. We're not going to learn anything.
Right. I mean, that's again a very interesting question, and I faced this, by the way. When we were running TurboTax, the tax season used to be a certain window of time, and whatever you need to do has to happen within the tax window that you have. So it's kind of a high intensity time within which you need to get it done. And also another interesting part about my days at TurboTax is I was running the desktop version of TurboTax, which meant that we had to print the CDs before the tax season starts. And in the day and age of printing CDs, your affordance to go wrong is not much. You need to get a lot of things right. What if the person can't update the software for whatever reason? So you need to be a lot more right in advance. So this leads to 2 parts. Maybe we'll touch upon how you understand the customer problems later, what kind of research methodologies that you use to do it. But then your larger question is, given that you have a limited window of time, how do you really work on things being right, get things right more often, right? If you do that, for that, one of the things that when I was managing the team, I struggled with was when the team was presenting to me, I would know that that's possibly not the right problem to solve, but I had a hard time articulating that to them as to why exactly this is not the right problem to solve. And the reason why the problem is very important in this case is because I feel that if you nail the problem right, your value proposition is going to be right. If you nail the value proposition right, and Randy, in my opinion, I think that makes or breaks the product eventually. Just today I saw someone, I think it's Jake Knapp, who did the design sprint. Those guys have come up with a new theory on why the product fails. And they allude largely to coming up with the right value proposition. And in our product world, it's very sparsely spoken. Most of them talk about growth and how do you manage it, but just the right definition of problem, the value proposition and growth the value proposition is sparsely spoken about. Do you want me to deep dive into value proposition? The problem as to how you define it?
I think, let's do a couple minutes on that. That would be great.
Okay. So when I was struggling with the team to how define problems, so eventually I think it got codified into 4 themes that recurred again and again. The first one, which I realized, was that when you don't have an existing behavior, when the behavior doesn't exist for some reason, you're going to take a longer time to inculcate the behavior. For example, if Randy is not a book reader and I gift him a Kindle, just because I gifted him a Kindle, I wouldn't expect him to start reading from the next day. I mean, probability is there, but that doesn't mean that there's a certainty out there.
Yeah,
As
accent
against,
may not have been my problem.
correct. Now, the key point to understand is, should you give up? No, it is not. I'm just saying that you need to be mindful of the adoption curve. The adoption would be gestated depending on how easy or hard it is for Randy to adopt that behavior. So that's number one. Just have that always in the back of mind before we get into problems. So that kind of a litmus test. And to credit this, I think someone from A16Z actually coined this, and that's where I picked this up from. They run this thing called despite test, which I thought was a very wonderful way to really look at things, right? I mean, if you're building something, is that already happening in customer's life in some form? So before I do Kindle, is he reading the books in some form? If I'm giving him a class pass, is he even going to gym in some form? So this could be foundational behavior on which, if you now build a product, higher chances of adoption. So that's number one to keep in mind. In absence of that, you're going to have a lot more capital, a lot more time spent in terms of waiting for adoption to happen. Second thing, and this is where most teams get it wrong, they think they're solving the right problem, but usually they aren't. So I was listening to this pitch from this startup in South America, and they were solving a mortgage issue. And they came to me and said, look, we've got robotic process automation, and you will file your mortgage application in 2 minutes. And then again, this was a time when I didn't have this codified, and I was struggling to telling them that, look, I think that is not the biggest problem that you want to solve. It's good. It's an important problem, but not the problem to solve. And then when I went into better.com, you would see on their website clear value saying that we save you thousands of dollars in your pocket. What that it eventually meant is, as a mortgage site, I've got the least interest out here. And so you buy it from me. Now, when you have a claim like this, Randy, I'll go on filling 1,000 forms. I don't care, because that's going to be a lot more written for me. And the robotic process automation pales in comparison when it comes to really giving the lowest interest to the customers. So
yeah,
then,
if I was facing this problem all the time, then maybe the pain of filling out the forms would be the problem to solve. But because I'm doing this infrequently, or just the once, hopefully, then the benefit is I will go through a pain because it is transient for a permanent savings.
Absolutely. And so the way we classify this is, the big enduring problem your customer has is the high interest mortgage rate. So why don't you focus on that and try your best to bring down the interest rate, right? Or the mortgage rate. That is your biggest lever to pull. Anything else is a transient problem in service of the big problem. So for example, form filling, as you rightly said, is going to be a transient problem. You do it once in a while just to get off to the mortgage interest. So if people have this distinction in mind, I believe they'll start classifying the problems much, much better than what they do right now, which increases the probability of you landing the right value. And then there's a fourth dimension. So if you know, and even if they're not right about it, I don't care. But as long as there's a conversation in the room about, hey, what's the enduring one? What's the transient one? The probability you will be right is going to be higher. And then the last bucket on this is the lock-in, right? So what I've realized about this is, in most low frequency or infrequent products, you need to steer the customer away from some parts. So usually most of them have been an existing old school business that you're going to steer them away from. For example, Warby Parker, the eyewear company in the US, they, in traditional terms, they used to go to the local neighborhood, eyewear retailer to buy it from them. Now, there was some kind of lock-in that was existing that you need to break to make them come towards Warby Parker and buy it. So the way Warby Parker did it was that they understood, okay, look, listen, the neighborhood eyewear retailer has a bit of trust. They've been buying with them for ages. It's not going to be easy for us to push them through. So how do I nullify that? maybe what I can do is go to Randy's home with a pair of 5 pairs of glasses that he really thinks he likes and show it to him, which is kind of then, nullifying the lock-in that they already have. So you need to assess the lock-in and see if there's a way you can nullify it so that the people can get attracted to you. The reason I'm telling you this is the biggest learning that we had when I was running TurboTax was that to grow the segment, we started saying that, okay, let's start targeting people who are now with chartered accountants. So we were largely in the DIY market. For people who don't know TurboTax, it's a DIY software in the US because US taxes
Special.
yeah. So, and it's a DIY market. And then we decided that we've saturated this market with 90+% market share. So let's go out and, get the other customers who are then better to their chartered accountants. And then, you know what? It's just hard to break. The lock-in with your trusted accountant is so hard to break. We just gave up. And so this lock-in gives you an understanding to, can you really break the lock-in or not? So the usual lock-ins are, you've got a strong searching cost. Searching cost is, I've got this accountant. I've been doing this with ages. My family has been doing this for ages. I'm not going to find another trustworthy one like this, or it's going to take a lot of search for me to do it. So I might as well stick to him. Second, switching cost. My data is all there in Gmail. I'm not going to switch. I might as well be there. So you need to evaluate the lock-ins and see which one is it very hard or is it easy for you to nullify it and bring them back. So this 4 dimensions, existing behavior, big enduring problem versus the transient problem, and the lock-in, gives you a nice framework to actually see what's the pulse in the market, who are you going to attract, and how are you going to bring them in. That's your problem framing. It's not exactly problem framing, but it kind of gives you a glimpse of how hard it is going to reel them in towards you. So that's kind of the problem world. That makes sense for you?
So I just want to be explicit. You've written an article about this. This is the BELT framework, existing behaviors, enduring problem lock-ins, and transient problems. There's one more thing I want to call out from that before we move on, which I think is really helpful and came up in a conversation I had with a couple of leaders last night about CEOs or salespeople coming by and saying, hey, can you fix this? This is the problem I perceive right now, which is coming back with the question, especially for infrequent products, is this the enduring problem? But a way of framing it, what's going to be the same in 10 years? Is this still going to be an issue? Is this something that's really worth us investing in? Or is this a problem that is likely to go away in the next year or two for other reasons? So how do we prioritize which bits to work on? I thought that was wonderful.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, thanks for calling out BELT. And this is a great framing as well. And I'll give another tip to really look at how do you look at the enduring problem besides what you just said. One other yardstick for you to look at is this actually driving the emotion of satisfaction is very important. For example, satisfaction is this long enduring emotion, and that comes only when you solve a problem, and it can sustain over a period of time. Someone waking up in a house that they love gives them extreme satisfaction, not delight. Delight is just a spike in that momentary happiness. Someone being in a long-term relationship with the person they love gives them a great satisfaction. You call it job satisfaction, not job delight. And all of these things have an enduring set of emotion, and that's a pulse for you to check. Okay, if I solve this, am I going to land this in a satisfaction, or is it going to be delight? And that's a good way to just pulse check what is enduring, what is transient.
Okay, I want to move on to another acronym that you had, which is the ICED theory, which is how to approach managing infrequent products well. Can you walk us through that one?
Sure. So now that we spoke about infrequent products, then the challenge was, how do you, the biggest issue that you had with infrequent products were, as I said in the start of the conversation, 3 of them. One is people forget, given that as the time elapses from their transaction, the more the recall goes down. Second, within the sliver of time that you have, you need to monetize them extremely well as a business. Third, most infrequent products suffer from what I call as a big marketing cost. So a case in point is Expedia. If you were to look at it, 45% of their revenue goes back into customer acquisition. That's a massive amount of cost to, reel back in. So then how do you manage this? What's a playbook of then getting these guys together? So for this, we need to marry how you're going to serve customers with that of the business problem. And that's what ICE does for you. So let's start with the basic stuff. When you have a customer on your platform, let's say you're running a jobs app, you want the successful outcome of this is going to be where a customer retains over a period of time to get the right job, right? I mean, they need to be staying on the platform to get the right job. So, the nuance here is there is retention in the infrequent products, but it is kind of baked in and not as explicit as you see it in the high frequency products. So when someone comes through a month or a two before they land on a job, this is what I call as an active retention. And this is a key pillar, which is called engagement in the ICE theory. I'm going to jumble up the pillars, but I'll eventually cover all of the ICE. The E, engagement, is the core pillar of infrequent products, where you're going to ask three questions. Hey, as I'm looking at this product, what should I do to get to the product market fit? So we already spoke about the problem that you need to classify. You then set up a right value proposition so that you penetrate the market so that you start going into product market fit. But as you do this, you need to ensure that they're engaged in the process to complete the transaction, right? So that's number one. The second question you need to ask within the engagement is, how complex is this product for me to manage? An example is, if you were to look at a property purchase versus that of an insurance purchase, it's miles apart. The number of variables that you need to manage in a property purchase is way more complex than, perhaps buying an insurance. So that's another question for you to keep in mind when you're looking at engagement as a lever. The third thing that you need to look in mind is, if I need to engage the customers, is it a single touch product or a constant touch product? So let me illustrate. If you do an insurance insurance, for example, if you buy an insurance, you buy this once and you leave. You're not going to use the insurance again and again until it's required. Or for that matter, TurboTax is a single touch product. You go use it once and then you leave. TripAdvisor is a single touch product. When you're going on a travel, you just use it once and leave. A constant touch product is something like your mobile phone and a Nike. You buy a Nike shoe, you wear it every day. The brand gets reinforced on you every day. Now that's a low frequency product as well, but it's got a constant usage. So you need to then parse it out and see, hey, what am I supposed to do to actively retain the customers to complete the transaction? How complex is this product for the customers? And what's the touch? Is it a single touch or a constant touch? So you parse it. That's the E of this. I'll pause here. How does this?
Yeah, so I just want to say, so an infrequent product in this case refers to how often the purchase decision is made. So it can be trainers, it can be a phone, it can be a B2B enterprise thing, even if the usage is consistent or constant.
That's a great point. It's the transactions that count. How often are the transactions made? So a mobile phone is a classic low frequency product. You buy it once in 2 years or 3 years, assuming. And that's a great example of a low frequency product. But that one has constant usage. So every day you use your Apple or Samsung, you know that that's the brand and it gets reinforced. So the E pillar is what I'm focusing on, because the engagement pillar is very important, because when you parse out these dimensions and start dishing out strategies, you're essentially solving for two things. You're solving for, is this product having predictable or unpredictable retention? So let me explain. If Randy has filed taxes with me, or Randy has done insurance with me, there's a high chance he's going to come next year to me to do his taxes or insurance. That's a predictable retention problem. But when Randy has come on to a dating or a job site with me or a property site with me, I wouldn't know when he's going to come back again. That's a unpredictable retention problem. So in most of these low frequency products, you have two categories of those products. And knowing what kind of product that you have, all the three parts I spoke about, you should use it in such a way that your strategy should be, if Randy is going to come, if I'm running a predictable retention product, I need to seed in value so that he comes back to me again with high probability next year or whenever is the time when he's supposed to transact. And in an unpredictable retention product, the best strategy that I have is, let's say Randy came to transact property with me, but I don't know he's going to come back next, maybe 7 years, 10 years. I have no idea when he's going to come back. So the best strategy is for me, make Randy refer 3 other guys before he goes. So that's the E pillar of your entire ICE framework. And that pillar is that pillar focuses on product market fit. When you do all of these elements well, you start increasing the penetration in the market. So I always suggest that you start with E. Okay, so you've done a great job of actively retaining them, completing the transaction, also understanding if they're predictably retaining, not retaining, and getting them back. Mm-hmm. What next? But it is just not enough if they do the transaction, but they need to be there with you for lifetime. Remember, I told you that the CAC of these guys are pretty much high. So you need to ensure that the CAC goes down. And for that, I don't have to reacquire Randy again and again. So the I of the ICE theory talks about how do you lifetime retain these customers? What kind of strategies that you can put to the lifetime retain? Usually the ploy is, and here I need to quote Richard Burton. He's most of these, what I'm talking about is from his playbook. For people who don't know Richard Burton, he started with Glassdoor, Zillow, all of these in Expedia, all of them classic infrequent products. And he seeded in each of them something that makes people come back during their lifetime. For example, Zillow has something called as a Zestimate, where people want to come back again and again to check their home value. In terms of Glassdoor, he seeded in the salary checker, where people will come in between their reviews just to say, hey, how am I doing in terms of salary against others? So in each of these, he had some kind of a seeding of a frequency hook, if you will, where people actually came back again to check that. So that's the infrequency, that's the I dimension of your ICE theory that focuses on lifetime retention. Now, E and I together should take care of your marketing pretty well. You've retained them. You've not just retained them for the transaction, but you've also retained them for a lifetime. But here's the kicker. Usually, if you know these two, it's necessary, but it's not sufficient. What will bring your marketing costs down is you need to be distinctive in the market in some form so that you're on top of mind. And an example is Airbnb. If you contrast Expedia's traffic with that of Airbnb, Airbnb is 90% of traffic is organic and direct. Just because there's just one Airbnb that comes to mind most often. VRBO exists, but everybody goes to Airbnb most times. So that says if you're distinctive in the market, if you have a great brand in the market, not only it serves as your biggest moat, and I'll talk about that if you're interested, why brand is the biggest moat for low frequency products, but it also drives your CAC down tremendously. So now you've got great retention with E, I is lifetime retention, and you've got strong distinctiveness. All together is going to pull your CAC down tremendously. Okay, we've spoken about CAC. What about the LTV? What will actually pull that up? How can you monetize the users better? Is the dimension which I call as the control over experience. Now, here's again, very interesting observation. So the low frequency products are generally complex and high values, such as properties, right? Now, all these things are complex in the sense that relationships are complex, or dating for that matter. If you take these, they cannot be transacted on a platform, or they don't get transacted on a platform. A lot of things happen offline, beyond the online world. So two people meet, they go out for a date. You don't know what's happening on the date. The recommendation engine spitted out something. You met with a person, but you really don't know how the date went. And that feedback loop is not getting into the recommendation back to give you better partners. And this opacity creates problem in terms of how can you monetize. So putting it the other way, if you can have complete control over experience in terms of the transaction, then your ability to monetize a consumer is much, much higher. That's a central thesis.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, so I'll give you one example, and this was a good one actually, which came up in India. So I don't know which of the classifieds. So it was OLX, I guess. So what they were doing was, when I was leaving India and I was selling out my furnitures, someone bought it, of course. But the biggest pain is now, how do I ship it to them? So these guys had this thing called easy-step delivery, where you call them up, they escrow the fund from the customer, they pick up the furniture from my end, and they give it to the furniture. Now, suddenly, a classified has become much more meaningful. They become an e-commerce platform, and they took an extra pie from me, but I'm happy to give it. And now, so it monetized not just on my furniture listings, but also on the transaction, they've taken a pie out of it, which I was happy to give. So my average revenue per user, as per them, has gone up. So that, I think, is the control over experience. A company moving from, just partial transaction to the complete transaction, so they get more out of the pie.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay, Vivek, we've only got a limited amount of time left, and so I wanted to dive into one of the practical issues that comes up with this, which is, how do I understand what's going through my users' minds during the hiatus between when they use the product? If they're only going to use it once a year, once every 7 years, how do I exert any control or understand what's going on with them?
Randy, it's a very interesting question. So I'm gonna start off with this. Have you come across this book called Customer Experience? They talk about the customer experience score. I think it's the book called Customer Experience. Have you read this? Have you come across this book? Because
the title sounds generic, and I feel like I should know it, but I don't know this one.
Well, it's fascinating. I hope I'm getting the title right, but for those who are listening, you should Google it up and say that the book that talks about customer experience score, it's a blue cover. So that's the book that we're talking about. And the reason I'm quoting this book is it just opened my eyes phenomenally. I'm going to digress a bit and come back to your question. The digression is, I read this book. They studied almost 4,000 companies, and they said there is no correlation between delighting a customer and retaining them. The central thesis that we always keep saying that, you delight the customer and you'll retain them, that doesn't exist. So this is very intriguing. And what they also go on to say is, customers leave you only because when they find a pit in the experience or some kind of a problem in the experience, and that's when they decide to leave you. So this was very intriguing. And then I went on to read this book called Moments by the Chip brothers. And they talk about something very unique as well. And they say that, how do you know that you really delighted someone, or how do you know that you delivered a good experience to someone? You will know it by the fact that if someone goes to the Universal Studio and comes back and you ask them, how was it? Or Disney Park, let's say, how was your day? It's not the sum total of all the experiences that they had. It's just the one or two experiences that blew their mind. That is what defines the experience for them for that particular thing, right? The reason I'm telling you this is the flip side is so true for the low frequency products. So I was just chatting with you and I was telling you my son is just 3 years old. So not before long, we were going through this pregnancy as well. And most of our friends, they had gone through this much ahead of us in the time. And when you go out and ask them about what were their experiences, all they could remember is either the peak experience or the most definitive bad experience and nothing in between. So the user research, if you were to go out and ask the users, you're not going to get something really credible, or something really insightful, because they will only remember the peaks and the trough, the lowest trough and the highest peak. That's all you will get. So over the years, what I've learned, and this happened with Intuit. Intuit has this thing called Follow Me Home. Have you heard of it?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great way of ethnography study. We go out and we sit next to the users and we find out. And so, in any kind of episodic product, the amount of insights that you glean from users is extremely high when you can go into an ethnography. So be it in my property guru days where we did diary studies of users, or when in TurboTax days where we actually sat next to users and did follow me homes, the insights that you glean are unparalleled to even the interviews for the reasons that I mentioned, because only the highs and troughs are remembered. And when you're in the journey, it's very hard for you to articulate what really happens. So would you like an example of what that is? I mean, I can just give a one in terms of, so TurboTax, we did countless interviews, and Intuit is known to be a very strong customer empathetic company. But what was very interesting is, in spite of all the interviews, when we did a follow me home, we observed things that we could never garner from the interview. For example, we went and sat next to the user. The user was putting in, he carried this massive box of all papers, and these are all papers that is used for filing his taxes, right? And from his medical claims to what have you. And then he goes to, every time, the way TurboTax works is it asks you a question and you need to input the answer to the question and you move on. So every time there's a question, he ruffles through the box, gets the paper, and then he inputs the answer. And then we were observing it and we said, look, how long did it take for you to collect this paper? He said, 4 or 5 hours. That's a lot of time. Over the year, you're going to spend almost 4 hours. In certain cases, it's almost like 48 hours to 1 week just to put those papers together. And I said, that's the biggest problem to solve. In none of the interviews came up. And so we came back and we said, okay, how do we then solve this problem? Maybe we create data pipes to directly, get his documents onto TurboTax even before he's collecting it. And that led to a new vision and strategy, which doesn't exist prior to that. That's kind of an indication of how observation gives you things that they don't even know that's a problem. Because for the user, they've been doing this for ages. They don't even perceive that as a problem. And so when you sit down and observe, you'll find stuff that you wouldn't otherwise.
Vivek, this has been fantastic. I think we've got time for one last question, and this is slightly on a different matter, but I'm curious as to your thoughts about it. And it's more of an ethical conundrum. So this is something that comes up with frequent products, but even more so with infrequent products. A lot of what something you mentioned earlier was we're trying to create a habit for people with things. And my analogy for this is almost medicine. The way that capitalism works with medicine is we as patients, we want a cure for our problem, but they want a treatment. They want something that is a subscription that's a reliable source of revenue. So as people who work for a company, we want the revenues to go up. We want our paychecks to go up. We want our bonuses. But is this an ethical conundrum that we need to deal with? Or should we be focusing on treatments or should we be focusing on cures?
Great question. And I may not go into the ethical side of it, but I can tell you that I've been living with this conundrum myself for a bit. And as I translate your question into the product world, the cure is solving the problems and the treatment is, you dishing out something and seeing that works. So Randy, for long, I'd been plagued with this question or intrigued with this question as to why do all the product managers, in spite of knowing the playbook that find the customer problem, solve it, and it shall rain, right? But then you see that the probability, most products aren't very successful. The product success rate is dismal. And why is that then this playbook doesn't seem to be working as much in comparison to, if you look at all the home runs in the internet world, and I'm now stepping outside of low frequency products and talking as a product guy in general, if you see Facebook was a hot or not, just started over the weekend. Twitch, it wouldn't have come from a very strong customer research. Someone wants to watch someone else game. If you look at all of these products which got born, they don't really solve a customer problem. They have a value that they dish out to customers. Customers love it, and they've grown from there. And there's this disconnect in terms of, okay, that if you solve customer problems, it shall rain. 2, the home runs on the internet have actually been started with throwing out something, seeing if it sticks, and it's been growing. So what's the right approach? How do you even know that this is the right path to go? Has always been on my mind. And I think I've settled to this extent right now, where I've come to a realization is all the low frequency products have a clear problem definition. So you can index on problems and solve them well. But beyond that, if you really want to be successful in the product world, I would imagine the path there is going to be, and this is a very controversial statement, lot many people don't like it, but it's important that they at least deep dive into this question honestly and see that if they look around the founders who are extremely successful, be it Snap, Twitch, Facebook, all of them, most of them didn't start out to change the world. They changed the world happened as a matter of them being successful, not the other way around. So then why is this disconnect? How did they even start about the value? So in the new world, I would say that you also have this thing of putting out the value and seeing if it sticks, right? With the AI coming in, that should be much more easier. So if you're generally doing products, just don't stick to the customer problems. You could also benefit from thinking value first, putting it out there and six. One small addition though, all the examples that I said, Twitch, Twitter, possibly your Facebook, these are fundamentally entertainment products, not utility products. All the utility products are problem-based. All entertainment products are value-based. So for an entertainment products, you might want to throw and see what sticks. Utility products, you might want to index on the problem, but still the world is ambiguous. It's not very clear-cut. It's a question worth pondering on. And with AI in the scene where you can now release things in light speed, you have all the bandwidth or wherewithals to actually put out the value first products and also see if it sticks in the market. But that's something for people to just ponder upon and see what suits them.
Vivek, thank you. This has been a fantastic chat. If people want to follow up with you, what's the best way?
I'm very active on LinkedIn. People can Google me up at LinkedIn and then take it from there. I'm also conducting a course on low frequency products. They can go into thesteps.co. I'll share the link with you for your listeners who can go out and enroll. We've got 2 cohorts, one with Asia and one with Europe, friendly time. So whoever is interested, they can go out and enroll.
Fantastic. Well, I look forward to learning more about it. And thank you again so much. Have a great day.
It was an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me.
The Product Experience hosts are me, Lily Smith, host by night and Chief Product Officer by day.
And me, Randy Silver, also host by night. And I spend my days working with product and leadership teams, helping their teams to do amazing work.
Luran Pratt is our producer and Luke Smith is our editor.
And our theme music is from product community legend Arnie Kittler's band, POW. Thanks to them for letting us use their track.